Love him or hate him, Lane Kiffin is always going to be interesting. He's always going to be good television. He's always going to be entertaining. But the latest iteration of Lane Kiffin, and there's already been a few in his career, is tremendous for both college football and SEC football going forward. Today on Southeastern 14, we tell you why. Hello, everyone. I'm Blaine Gilmer. Welcome to Southeastern 14, covering all things SEC football during this offseason. Also, Chris Lee, Blake Lovell do a tremendous job covering both men's and women's basketball and also baseball. They're going to be getting into some of the other sports as we continue to expand SEC coverage in a way that nobody else does here on Southeastern 14. Daily videos coming out, so make sure to like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you listen to audio podcasts as well, and you catch our content there. So without further ado, let's get into talking about Lane Kiffin 2.0. And really, it could go higher than 2.0, right? He's had so much already go on in his football career, whether that's, being the offensive genius and young kind of brilliant mastermind at USC under Pete Carroll, and then what happened there from Pete Carroll, and then being the USC head coach, being the Raiders head coach, being Tennessee's head coach, all about how that kind of flamed out in a decade span there, and then ended up kind of being a pariah for a little while until Nick Saban brought him back in the fold into the Saban rehab clinic over there that he is so famous for in Tuscaloosa. And Lane Kiffin really changed that Alabama program forever. And arguably, Lane Kiffin changed college football forever by making Alabama a perennial offensive juggernaut and changed how teams do things, change how teams defend, change how teams build their offenses with what he not only helped assemble in terms of recruiting those wide receivers and quarterbacks that he did to Alabama, but changing the system and changing how Nick Saban to this day still holds a lot of elements and a lot of the terminology and a lot of the concepts that Lane Kiffin brought to Tuscaloosa in his offense today. Tommy Rees, the new offensive coordinator at Alabama, will be forced to do a lot of those principles and things because that's just how Saban is, and he doesn't change from that. And the legacy of Lane Kiffin is going to be one that's going to be looked at back on in a variety of different ways. But an article came out on ESPN yesterday that said why Lane Kiffin chose to stay at Ole Miss and didn't take the Auburn job, and talked about the maturity and how, listen, I think people like to, cast stones and things like that and be like, well, he shouldn't have been looking if he was happy with Ole Miss and things like that. But there's two sides to every coin. And when a program that is as, historic as Auburn is, that has had chances to win national championships, to play for national championships, that's something that Ole Miss to this point has not done. So I think Lane Kiffin had to look at that job, had to take things into consideration, but has shown some maturity not only on that front. Lane Kiffin is about as open and honest as you'll find in terms of how the transfer portal goes, how the NIL deals with players should be perceived, and also how they are affecting college football. He's wearing sweatshirts that say hashtag come to the SIP, hashtag transfer to the SIP. He is open about it, being referred to as the portal king. The thing about Lane Kiffin now is where some coaches are very, very staunch and very not, I would just say, not media savvy. Lane Kiffin understands how to use the media as a vehicle. He understands how to not be to take himself too seriously, especially when it comes to social media and all that kind of stuff. Yes, he'll still troll people. He'll still do things along that nature, cause a stir. He enjoys that. He's a bit of a pot stirrer, if you will. But Lane Kiffin understands that, one, he doesn't take himself too seriously. He's more self-deprecating now. I think that the last faux pas that you really saw out of him, the get your popcorn ready deal before the Alabama game a couple years ago in Tuscaloosa, I think that was kind of maybe your last big, bold, brash Lane Kiffin, faux pas, if you will. I think he understands. Listen, he took Ole Miss to a point where they were 7-0 this past year. Yes, the season didn't end the way they wanted to, but now he's coming out and saying, hey, I'm not worried about players' feelings, okay? I don't preach players on that their family here at Ole Miss, because he said that's people lying to you. They're not going to treat you exactly like they would treat their family inside of a program, which I think is a refreshing thing to say. Todd Monken, who was with the Georgia Bulldogs as offensive coordinator during their run over the last couple of seasons for national championships, he said the same thing as before he went to the Baltimore Ravens. He said, listen, I love working at the University of Georgia. I trust Kirby Smart more than anybody that I've been around. But to use the line of family and things like that, he said that's just not the case. He said family is a forever type thing. You're going to stay around your family. You're going to fight for your family. You're going to be there. But when new jobs come open or new opportunities come open, we don't hesitate in this business to go and look at them and do things. Now in the college football world, Lane Kiffin pointed out, coaches don't hesitate to ship players out and say, like, hey, I'm going to help you transfer because I think you would benefit going. In other words, he said, you don't do that to family. He goes, you find ways to keep family around and help family and things like that. So I think it's just a refreshing honesty from Lane Kiffin. And he's really been out on the forefront of saying that with NIL, he said every year is unrestricted free agency. He said this is pay for play. He just cuts right through all of it. And he said that the transfer portal and NIL kind of went into his decision-making with Auburn. Said that if this was 10 years ago, he probably wouldn't have made the same decision because he was seeing that, hey, in the last couple of head coaching reigns there at Auburn, the teams have been, number one or number two in the AP poll. They've had chances to win national championships. Of course, that was before Brian Harsin and that whole debacle. But, the last few head coaches that have been there have had big opportunities at Auburn. He probably would have just jumped at it. But he's learned a lot. He's learned a lot over the years and says that, hey, Ole Miss has unique opportunities, whether it's through the transfer portal and things like that, because they're not a blue blood when it comes to high school recruiting. Traditionally, they're not going to have, a top 5 recruiting class year in and year out, but he can go and get guys that he thinks outside the box in ways to go and say, okay, whether I'm going to, rent a Bentley and go stand beside this guy, or I'm going to rent a Rolls Royce, or he does creative things and goes out there and he's relating to these players. He's relating to the people that he's pitching this vision to, right? And he came out and said at SEC Media Days last week, he said, we are pro sports. He said, we are, players are getting paid to play the game. And he said, why would you not want to go somewhere where money is a factor? He said, we do it as adults. We have a conversation about what our compensation is going to look like before we go take a job or something like that. And he said, that's what these kids are doing. And he said, you can't blame them. He said, you have to have a pro mindset in this deal. He was quoted as saying, these coaches sell parents on, especially in the South. Come here, it's family. We're going to treat you like family. I'm not. No, they're not. If it's family, then why do coaches bring kids and say, hey, we want to help you transfer? It'd be better for you to transfer. You don't have to do that to your family. So the whole family thing, I say we have to teach is some reality that there's a business side. And what he's talking about that business side is he's not worried about Jackson Dart's feelings when he brings in Walker Howard and Spencer Sanders to compete for the starting quarterback job at Ole Miss. A lot of people say, why do you want to create that kind of drama and headaches for you in the offseason? Lane Kiffin is worried about one thing. He's worried about building the most talented roster he can for Ole Miss, and he's not really going to bat an eye at what people think about how he's going about building that roster. Listen, the NCAA at this point is a little bit toothless, and I'm sure that when it comes to NIL and transfer portal and contacting people and how everything goes about it, I'm sure nothing is on the up and up across the board. But when it comes down to it, you can't argue that anybody is operating in this space outside of maybe Kirby Smart and winning back-to-back national championships is operating better relative to where they are than Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. A 10-win season a couple of years ago, had that 7-0 start. They the quarterback play suffered at times defensively. They got to get a little bit better. But I think Lane Kiffin, now that he knows he's going to be there at Ole Miss for a while, I think his attitude towards NIL, towards the portal, towards college football as a whole and all the changes is tremendous for college football. I think it's a breath of fresh air versus the buttoned up, I'm going to take things as seriously and give the media as little as possible stuff with Nick Saban and Kirby Smart and all those guys. I think guys like Lane Kiffin, guys like Josh Heupel, tremendous for college football. Now Shane Beamer, that's a whole different subject we'll get into another day. You can be a little too much the other way, but I think Lane Kiffin has matured. I think Lane Kiffin has learned what's important in life and what's not, and I think he is calling a spade with NIL and the transfer portal here in college football. Listen, a 12-team playoff going forward, something like that, a program like an Ole Miss now can get hot. Can be hot at the end of the season and find themselves into a playoff, especially with the talent and the turnover that they bring in each year through the portal. I think Lane Kiffin and how they do things at Ole Miss is refreshing, is going to be good for college football. Leave your comments. Let us know what you think here below. Again, I am Blaine Gilmer for Southeastern 14. We'll catch you guys next time.